Let's get corrupted. What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Joe with Meteoric Serpents coming back at you for another episode of the Colubrid Corruption Podcast. Guys, it's great to be back another week. I know I missed last week. My parents were in visiting, so that was always good. And yeah, I just didn't have an episode scheduled, so my apologies. But we are back for episode number 84. This is definitely going to be a good one. Guess I've been looking forward to since Colubrid Fest, and I'm sure we'll talk a bit about that tonight. But for anyone who's tuning in for the first time, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you hit the subscribe button here on the channel. That always helps out. If you don't always like listening on YouTube, you could check us out on all the major audio podcasting platforms, Apple, Spotify, Google, YouTube Music, all that good stuff. But always feel free to give a like and subscribe on YouTube if you listen over there. I think I said it on the last episode. The subscribe to not subscribed ratio is so atrocious on this channel. I cannot believe it, especially when I almost exclusively do this podcast on this channel. So guys, if you're watching, just hit the subscribe button. It helps out. We're chasing 1,200 still. But yeah, I hope you guys are all doing great this week. Let's see what's new over here. Nothing too much before we get into everything. Nothing too much is new. Just today was the last meals for the adult colubrids that are going into brumation. So yeah, according to the plan I wrote out a couple weeks ago on that solo episode I did. So yeah, it's coming to that time of the year and I'm excited. But yes, also guys, if you aren't following me elsewhere, you could find me at Meteoric Serpents pretty much on every social media platform. Instagram is the best place to reach me, of course. Post to Facebook as well, TikTok, all that good stuff. Some snakes available on Morph Market. I have a couple Texas rats left, and getting my cockseye posted probably within the next week. Those will be ready to go. So if anyone's looking for cockseye, let me know. But yes, let's see what else is on the agenda. Guys, first link in the description below takes you to the Meteor Serpents Patreon. If you want to support this podcast more, if you want to get access to a cool Discord group chat with a bunch of people who like colubrids, consider joining that. There are also some other great perks you get along with that. Feel free to go check it out. Again, first link in the description below. As always, big thank you to fulviusapparel.com for supporting Colubrid Corruption. Justin does great work over there. T-shirts have great representation across the hobby. Really the best herp-related merch you could get. Shirts, hats, hoodies, whatever it may be. And Justin's got tons of designs on there. If you want to go shop on fulviusapparel.com, go ahead and use code CC10 at checkout. Again, that's code CC10 to get yourself 10% off your order. And yeah, you'll get hooked up, fast shipping, all that good stuff. And yeah, hopefully you like your Fulvius apparel. So thanks again, Justin, for supporting the show. What else am I missing? I didn't pull up my little checklist. Let's see. Oh, I can't even find it. All right. Also, guys, if you're looking to support, the reptile hobby in a different way, you could check out the CCR Conservation Fund. Again, we raised $20K at Colubrid Fest going towards this conservation in Iowa, specifically of hognose snakes, along with other species. But really good. Zach and his students, are working on this project. I think it's something great that we can support. I know conservation is going to be a topic of conversation tonight. So we'll get into that for sure. But yeah. And our hashtag Colubrid Corruption of the Week. Can't forget that. Guys, I know I said it on the last episode, but Instagram really jacked up something. I don't know why, but when I pull up the hashtag, it basically pulls up like all Colubrid posts anything that says Colubrid in it for a hashtag is coming up on the feed. I don't really know why, so I have to like really go through and find stuff that says Colubrid corruption on it, but so be it. But we have this nice little Amel Everglades rat from Preston at Converse Constrictors. Go give Preston a follow. Clean looking snake. Not much else to say about it. So yeah, this is our hashtag Colubrid corruption of the week. He was a guest of the show, so go check out Preston's episode. And thank you for sharing, guys. If you want to be featured, use hashtag Colubrid corruption on your Colubrid photos. I choose one weekly and give that person a shout out. So yeah. All right. So a couple people in the chat tonight. I don't think Mike's actually here, but thank you for sending a chat here. We have Chris from Copperhead Reptilia. Got Adam from Ivory Colubrid Co., one of the Patreon members. I appreciate you, dude. Thanks for being here. We have Aurora Exotics. Thanks for tuning in. But without further ado, again, someone I've been very much looking forward to bring on the show. We have Dr. Zach Whitman of Conservation Herpetoculture. What's up, Zach? How are you?
Hey, how's it going, Joe?
Good. Yeah, you were my travel buddy for Colubrid Fest. We did a lot of talking since we had about 20 plus hours in the car together. But here you are on the show. I knew there would be plenty of stuff we talked about that would make good topics of conversation for the show. But you know, it's not always about that. The people listening may not 100% know who you are. So if you don't mind, for anyone who's not super familiar with you, can you give a little bit of an intro of, you know, how you got into reptiles and how that kind of segued to where you are today, however long or short you want to make that?
Yeah, for sure. I've been interested in all animals since I was a super little kid. If you'd asked me when I was young what I wanted to do, I've wanted to be a vet ever since I was a little kid. The reptile bug definitely hit me pretty early. I got my first snake when I was 8 or so. It was a little calcane snake. And when I was a teenager, I spent a bunch of years working in high school at a reptile specialty pet shop in New Jersey. That was in the late 90s, which was just a really, really cool time to be getting involved in herpetoculture. And so I was just involved in all different species, all different morphs, and a lot of people, because there wasn't such great vet care available for reptiles, a lot of people would just bring sick animals into the reptile shop all the time or ask for advice. So that really was always kind of the prime motivator that kept me on the road towards going towards vet school, was the reptile thing and the lack of good vet care available for reptiles. So ultimately I went to the University of Vermont. I got my undergrad degree in animal science there, and then went to Colorado State for vet school. And since then, I have been back in New York. From New Jersey originally, I guess born in Manhattan originally, grew up in Jersey. And I've been where I am now in the Hudson Valley for about a decade. And what I do now is I have a small nonprofit that is a wildlife rehab facility. I treat a ton of wild injured turtles and do a lot of egg incubation and that kind of thing. And we're also involved in a pretty big conservation project for blandings turtles here in Dutchess County. And we're actually head starting baby blandings turtles here. Partnering with a couple different organizations to do that. The Wetland Trust is a big one, and obviously the New York State DEC folks. And then I've got my sort of side hobby breeding business, conservation herpetoculture. And at the moment I'm practicing full time. I'm working at an emergency room, so most of the vet side of stuff that I'm doing now is dogs and cats, but I have worked at other places in the past that were more predominantly exotics.
Gotcha.
So I guess that's the shortest version of how I got here.
All right, very good. Yeah, and so yeah, you're just working with animals basically 24/7. It just doesn't end.
Yeah, yeah. I think I can't count them right now, but on my property at the moment, we're probably at about 300 or so animals, 400 maybe,
Okay. Yeah,
depending on how many baby snapping turtles there are.
right. Yeah, and you said the turtles make, some good numbers of what's on your in your facility, on your property, however you want to phrase it. But yeah, I mean, listen, that's no joke on top of being, the ER vet you are. I know you work crazy hours and long hours, so um big kudos to you because that obviously isn't easy, and turtles are very high maintenance animals. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. No shortage of things to do around here.
I'm sure. I'm sure. So let's kind of talk I guess we could get right into colubrids. You said your first was a Cali King. How did your collection kind of evolve from there, and how have you, structured it over the years, and what are you currently keeping and all that good stuff?
Yeah. Um, Over the years, I've done a lot of different things, but colubrids were definitely what started it off for me. I've spent more hundreds of hours staring at king snakes and watching their behavior and tweaking little things and seeing how they respond to it. And that was just kind of like my introduction to herpetoculture. Was mostly king snakes and milk snakes and Pituophis and stuff like that. For the first, I would say, decade or so, that was really my main interest. I had built up a pretty good size collection of mostly locality specific, some morph stuff, of almost entirely colubrids and also the anthill pythons. I've been breeding anthill pythons since like 2001 ish. Um, but it was mostly colubrids. And when I was in vet school, I started my first breeding business and started going to the reptile show in Denver and started actually producing some stuff and selling some stuff. And that was the ball python. I mean, the colubrid market was kind of bottoming out at that point. Everything had gotten crazy, crazy cheap. That didn't really bother me. I was breeding stuff just because I liked working with it.
Yeah.
But when I was in my senior year of vet school, I ended up getting pretty sick. I got diagnosed with a very rare and aggressive form of lymphoma, and I basically had to sell off my entire collection like overnight. Wasn't 100% sure what was going to happen to me. Didn't want to leave my family with hundreds of snakes. And so aside from just a couple of literally lifelong pets like that original Cal King that I still had, I got rid of almost everything.
Yeah.
And so took a couple of years off from everything after surviving that and going through everything that I went through. It just took a little while to kind of get the confidence again to start thinking about the long term. Breeding reptiles is a long-term game, at least for me.
Yeah.
And when I started getting back into things, I had always liked ball pythons. I think my second snake when I was a kid was actually a normal ball python. And I had always really been intrigued by some of the really crazy looking morphs. I remember always wanting a piebald when they were first coming out, and they were crazy expensive. And when I was kind of getting back into the hobby after being sick, ball python market was kind of going crazy. I had always kind of wanted to get into that. So I invested in a bunch of piebald ball pythons and did that for a good decade or so. And the past few years, I've been starting to pull in a lot more of the oddball stuff again, the stuff that I'm really, really more interested in.
Yeah.
For me, I knew that I wanted to kind of do things with a little bit of like a philanthropic effect. So I kind of try and gear all of my projects towards conservation oriented projects, whether that's animals that are actually rare, whether that's animals that could just disappear from the US hobby because the gene pool is so small here, whether that's animals that are being unsustainably poached and could benefit from a captive bred market being developed for them. Those are kind of the main things that I'm interested in working with. And I also donate a fair amount of the money that I generate from the snake breeding side of things, both to the nonprofit side and also to all different reptile charities and organizations. So at the time, the ball pythons were sort of one of the best ways to drive the financial side of that, and be able to donate significant money where I wanted to. Now for me, the ball pythons are really kind of a gateway. I love the title of your whole podcast here. For me, the ball pythons are a bridge. I love them. I think that they are the perfect pet snake for a lot of people, for young kids, for a lot of different reasons. They're as popular as they are. If you follow my feed, you're going to see a lot of nice weird stuff, and you're going to also see a lot of really nice ball pythons.
Yep. Yeah. Now, when you said before that, like, you like the, kind of unusual species, the ones that are rare, as you started building a colubrid collection by you, what did that kind of look like? What were some species you had in mind and still have in mind as stuff you wanted to really build on, stuff you're not seeing in the hobby a whole lot that you want to see more of?
Yeah, so I guess just on the colubrid side of things, I have quite a few things that are all in like the 2 to 3 year age range. So hopefully I'll be starting to produce some of these things this spring and certainly next year. But I did get into the Asian rat snakes a little bit. I got a bunch of locality specific stuff from Matt Most from Sarpamitra. So I have some Viante, I have some Mandarins, I have some Coxile from him, the new bloodline of Coxile that he brought in, and I have a couple of others from the original Pro Exotics line, and so we'll be just combining those a little bit. I have a couple Byrd's rat snakes that I got from, what's his name? You've had him on the show, Antoine. What's his business name?
Captive Bred.
Captive Bred Studios.
Yeah.
His Baird's rats are pretty fire. They're like 4 or 5 years old now, and they're glowing orange and yellow. So unfortunately I screwed up with those guys last year, and I got a bunch of slugs from them. But I did it to myself. This is going back 2 years ago. I cycled them for breeding. They were 3 years old. The females seemed like they had good size. I was planning on doing it, and springtime came around, and I was just like overwhelmingly busy. And I was just like, you know what I don't need? I don't need like 50 Byrd's rat snakes right now. And so I didn't pair them up, and I waited till the next year, cycled them again, paired them up as 4-year-olds, and then got 2 huge clutches of all slugs. And I'm sure that those were because they were ovum from the year before, and we're just kind of hanging around. Gotcha. So hopeful that I'll get those guys going this year. I got a couple of Cal Kings. Always have a couple of Cal Kings, just some random stuff floating around. I still actually have the original bloodline from that very first. My very first snake was also the very first snake I ever bred. Nice. And I have his grandson in the rack behind me over here. So a couple king snakes. And I think that's really it as far as the colubrids go at the moment. We've got a ton of other stuff going on.
Pituophis?
That's right. I just picked up something new. This was a species that got away from me. I freaking love Cape gopher snakes. And I had the most gorgeous trio back when I lived in Colorado before I got sick, and I never got to breed them. I ended up selling off my collection when they were like 3 years old. And I've been keeping my eye out for a long, long time for Cape Gophers that were half as nice as what I had. And just recently I was able to get my hands on a pair. So I got a 2025 pair of Cape Gophers now. Super pumped about those.
Yeah.
And other stuff. I've got a whole bunch of anthill pythons. I have a pair of Hog Island boas from Vin Russo. I just picked up a pair of Berry Island boas, which are the rare Caribbean species. Got a bunch of sabu pythons, bunch of oddball stuff.
Yeah. So I had a Patreon question. This goes in conjunction with something else I'll ask later, but Mason wanted an update on the bromeliad boas.
Yeah, I'm super excited about them. I think I have a gravid female right now, but I'm not 100% positive. So basically, I have a group. I have 2 pairs, and then I'm raising up a third female. And it's taken me a while to put together a group that was entirely, I'll call it captive hatched, even though they're live born. But to my knowledge, nobody's actually bred these things in captivity. As far as I know, any of them that have come on the market that have been babies have been wild females that have given birth. So a lot of people that I've known with these have had just random spontaneous deaths, animals that were doing well and then just keeled over one day. And I'm not at all sure what caused that, but I wonder about what kind of things the wild animals are coming in with. And I wonder a real lot about what's in the feeder lizards that a lot of people are using for these guys. Because they're pretty stubborn lizard feeders, at least when they're little babies. So it was really important to me that I tried to put together a group of animals that had not been in the wild and had not eaten Florida anoles, and that's the group that I have right now. And my oldest female is 4, and the male I have her with is 3, and then I have a 3-year-old female and a 2-year-old male together as well. And they've been together for the past few months now. I want to say like 6-7 months they've been together. I paired them up in the springtime. And I've been cohabiting them since then. One female has gotten dramatically larger. Like, she looks huge and swollen and engorged. And she's had a massive color change where she used to be like a really bright silver, and now she's like almost a black snake. So I feel like those are both positive signs that she's gravid. I never actually saw them like fully lock up. But I don't know how long she could be gravid for. I really just don't know what to expect. I keep coming down, checking every night, like waiting for something cool to be in there. The other 3 of them are all doing great, but haven't seen anything that looks like breeding activity yet. So I also have no idea what time of year these guys breed. So I'm hoping that maybe this winter we'll see some more activity.
Gotcha. All right. Very cool. Yeah, so, part of the reason I of course wanted to bring you on, obviously you keep cool colubrids, but you're just, you bring a lot of information to the table, a lot of really important stuff that I don't think most colubrid keepers and breeders will see on like the surface level of things. We had a lot of very in-depth conversations in the car rides that really made me think a little bit more than I ever have about the way I keep my stuff. One of the things that I definitely thought should be a topic of conversation was your stress of importance on temperature gradients for colubrids. And I wanted to see if you could kind of give your observations over the years, what you've done, and your just kind of thoughts overall on how important you find it to be.
Yeah. As you found out in the car, that's a big can of worms for me. I've spent sort of my whole life thinking about how reptiles utilize temperature and how they utilize microclimates and that type of thing. Um, so it can be a really big topic, but I think that first it's important not to overgeneralize. Different reptiles and different groups of reptiles utilize temperatures in very, very different ways. And if your predominant experience is with something that's tropical and arboreal and from a very stable, warm environment, versus if your primary experience is with more desert-oriented species, the way heavy-bodied species utilize temperature, like tortoises and large monitors and stuff, versus the way small species that can change temperature very quickly utilize their temperatures is really, really different. So I would not say that there's anything sort of one size fits all.
Of course.
But what I will say is, with king snakes kind of being my main, what I would consider like my mentor species, the species that I just spent the most time kind of just trying different things and watching what they did and experimenting. There are few animals that can utilize as extreme microclimates as smaller desert species like southwestern colubrids. They can see really dramatic swings in temperature from day to night. You're talking about 40 to 50 degree swings in temperature day to night sometimes. And moving just a couple feet out into the sun can be on a 120 degree baking hot rock, and moving a few feet back into the crevice can be in 70 degree, pretty deep underground. And if you give reptiles in captivity a big temperature gradient, they will show you all kinds of different behaviors than you would see keeping them with either no gradient or a reduced gradient. And I think my general rule of thumb for almost every species that I keep is think about what they would be exposed to in the wild, think about what they might want to utilize, and then give them as broad a range as possible and see what they do with it, and kind of let them guide me a little bit on what they do and what they do and what they utilize. For example, cow kings. You can keep a cow king at a standard 80 degrees, 82 degrees, pick your favorite temperature, with virtually no light cycling, virtually no food cycling, virtually no temperature cycling, and you can probably get them to breed and probably keep them for a very, very long time. But if you start to play around with things, you realize that they can perform at a much higher level. They can triple clutch, they can lay huge clutches, they can grow incredibly quickly, they have all of this potential. And they can only show you so much if you only give them certain parameters in which to do. So that's, I guess, my general philosophy.
Yeah, it was really interesting because especially over the last few years, I've been keeping a lot of my colubrids ambient. So I've just been like, when you said that, and between like John's talk at Colubrid Fest about the Applegate enclosures and whatnot, it kind of made me think. I was like, maybe I'm not doing enough for these guys. But yeah, definitely good stuff to think about for anyone, really.
I think if you give a lot of the I don't want to generalize. I don't want to say colubrids because I'm not talking about my mandarins here. I treat my mandarins very differently.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about arboreal rat snakes. I'm talking specifically about the more fossorial stuff. So the king snakes, milk snakes, pips, those kinds of things. Even our corn snakes and our rat snakes fall into this also. These guys are really, really, really adept at changing their temperature very quickly and very effectively. If you give, again, let's just say king snake a good temperature gradient, they will spend the majority of their time at or below 70 degrees, and they will very briefly use very hot basking spots, ideally cryptic basking spots. If you give them like some straw or some twigs or a sort of loose hide kind of thing over a heat source, they would rather do that than be out in the open. But they'll sit at over 100 degrees for just a minute or two, and then they'll go back to the cool side. And if you give them those big temps, you'll actually very rarely find them sitting at that 82 kind of middle ground. They're almost always going to be shuttling between the extremes.
Yeah, which is it's something to really think about, because in the wild, you said it before, like you take a king snake in the desert, they're probably sitting in a crevice, but probably right outside in the direct sunlight, there's a hot rock sitting there that's sitting at 120, various times throughout the day, and very likely when they're digesting, they're probably going to want to come out on the rock, sit there, even if it's for 2 minutes, because they're going to get really hot, and then they're going to dive back into the cold. But that's like enough that they need to boost their metabolism, or help with stuff.
Or they'll throw just one little loop of coil out into the sunny spot where they're digesting something, or they'll put just their head out so their brain and their senses are getting heated up, but their body isn't getting overheated. They're really, really adept at how they utilize that kind of stuff. And one of the biggest ways it comes into, one of the biggest things I see people talking about all the time is weight management in reptiles, and how much to feed reptiles, and what good body condition scores are, and all of those conversations that we're all hearing all the time. And so often I hear people having that conversation without talking about temperature, and you're missing like the biggest piece of it if you're not talking about temperature in the same breath as you're talking about how much you're feeding and what temperatures they have access to. I experimented with a lot of different things over the years, all different kinds of feeding schedules, all different kinds of high-end and low-end temperatures and stuff like that. And if you give a king snake a huge gradient and you feed him once every 10 days, he will almost never use the warm side of the enclosure. He's going to be as cold as he can the majority of the time. Maybe the day after he eats, he might move over to the warm side a little bit, but probably not going to actually ever get that temperature cranked up all the way. If you take that same exact snake and you keep him in the same exact setup and you offer him food every single day, he will utilize that hot side every single day and grow and grow and grow and grow. If you keep a king snake in a box at 82 degrees and feed it every day, then all kinds of weird things start happening. Then you start running into snakes that are kind of fighting against their ambush predator. Their ambush predator instincts are kind of opposed to the environmental conditions that they're in, and that's when you can start to see obesity and weird growth patterns and stuff like that. So I think temperatures are super, super relevant, and I think that just because a lot of the common pet trade colubrids are tough enough, hardy enough, generalist species enough to tolerate a really wide range, I think that sometimes gets them the short end of the stick when it comes to husbandry, and I think that probably plays into things like how often we see egg binding and overall lifespan and overall reproductive output and all these other kind of things that are soft kind of things that are hard to quantify.
Yeah. Cool. And that led into like the perfect segue, because we also talked about feeding. Of course, like you said, feeding kind of depends on temperature, but you brought up a good point to me, because I was asking about your kind of like feeding routines when it comes to breeding season. And I think this is something I have always slacked on, and it's something I'm taking way more into account this year. as I bring my stuff out of brumation, just like the philosophy of how I will feed going into that breeding season, it has to be like very intentional. So can you kind of go over what your thoughts are, and even from a scientific perspective of, how we're doing that as these animals come out of brumation, like how we're actually beefing them up, getting them ready for that breeding?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think so much of a female's reproductive output is about the calories going in. If you're if you're giving an animal all of the right cues, if your husbandry is optimal, if they have the temperatures that they need, then usually the limiting factor in the reproductive output is going to be calories. Females coming out of brumation are voracious, and they will pretty much eat as much as you want to feed them. And I've experimented with literally giving them food every day versus, various levels of cutting them back. The bottom line is I feed my females pretty heavily in the springtime. And for most of my king snakes and pits and milk snakes, that was like every 3 days or so, maybe every 3 to 5 days in the springtime, 2 food items at a time. And for my males, it really depended a little bit more on their individual personality. Some of my males were kind of notorious for going off food while females were cycling, and they would come out of brumation and they would have a really small window where they could eat a little bit, and then the females would start ovulating and cycling, and they would go off food again for another few months. So those guys I would feed really, really heavily again, that same like every couple days. Just in that little window that they would eat in between brumation and breeding season, just to kind of try and get as much weight on them as I could. The real big question for me comes after a female lays: how do you feed, and what are your goals in terms of encouraging or discouraging double clutching? And I think that's really where it gets into a lot more personal preference and what you believe is the right way to do things.
Right. So what's your thoughts on how you would do it? I know from our conversations you're on the side of like keep feeding them and let them double clutch, because if they're gonna, you'd rather them be good eggs to prevent potential egg binding and all that other stuff. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, I think that there's a fine line that
Wait, hold on, Zach. Your audio is all jacked up. Try exiting out of StreamYard, like exiting out of this and just coming right back in. Sometimes that fixes it. Okay. Sorry, guys. I just want to make sure audio stays good for all of you. This is really good stuff. Like I said, I had 20 plus hours with Zach to and from Colubrid Fest. We had a lot of really good conversations, and these were some of them. And, obviously I felt it should be shared with you as well. All right. I think he's back.
Is that back?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. So remind me what we're talking about.
Talking about feeding post first lay, and like the decision whether or not to double clutch, how you're going about feeding.
Yeah. So one thing I will see not uncommonly is people who don't want to overbreed their females and would rather they only lay one clutch and try and cut back on feeding over the summertime, and maybe they go like a once a week kind of feeding regimen after a female lays. And the female still has enough calories that tries to make a second clutch anyway, and you end up with female who's not getting fed very heavily, who ends up with a small clutch or infertile clutch, or ends up really skinny after double clutching. So I've seen a ton of problems trying to convince a female not to lay a second clutch of eggs, and how poor do you have to make your husbandry, and how little do you have to feed her to actually discourage her from laying. I think it's a fine line to walk. Personally, I find that fertile clutches are less problematic than infertile clutches. I sort of subscribe to the idea that if your females have optimal conditions, optimal calories, and optimal body condition, then they're going to produce optimally. And a lot of these species can produce clutches a year if they have those optimal conditions, and it's up to us to support them through that. And I've had a lot of females double clutch many years in a row and live into very old age. So it can be done.
Yeah. And, one of the other, pressures about that, maybe depending on the keeper or breeder, is like, oh, I don't want all these babies. But if we were to kind of take a step back and be real, if you really didn't want that second clutch, but you still wanted her to make it through it, healthy and coming out good on the other side, as much as I hate saying this, because I probably wouldn't, you could always toss the eggs, right?
Yeah.
Or feed
Definitely.
it to something else. If you don't want the eggs, sure, but you'd probably rather that snake give you good eggs than potentially a whole clutch of slugs, which can lead to egg binding, and and I'm sure we're gonna get into egg binding a little bit, but yeah, you'd just rather a set of good eggs, because the chance of a snake, Zach, if you want to chime in on this, there's chance of a good clutch, binding a female up is probably very low, right?
Yeah, I think that infertile clutches are much more likely to cause problems for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So
I'd say the most common feedback. Sorry.
No, you're good.
The most common feedback I got, and the most common question that I got after I talked to Colubrid Fest about egg binding, was people asking about giving females a year off. And it's the exact situation that I just described at the beginning of the show, talking about my hybrids, where you have a female who is ready to go, who can cycle, who makes follicles, and then doesn't get the stimulation to go, doesn't breed, and doesn't ovulate, and you have these old follicles that are just sitting around kind of waiting for an additional year. And so you see tons and tons and tons of slug clutches after you try and give your female a year off. So again, it's kind of, where is that line between breeding them too much but also supporting them optimally? It can be a little bit of a tricky line to walk.
Yeah. And would you say that bit at the very least is a more of a colubrid thing rather than like boas and pythons?
Sorry, your audio's not pretty there.
Oh, hold on.
Hello.
Is it working now?
You were breaking up there for a second.
Okay, I think we're back. Check 1, 2.
I'm good.
Okay. All right. I was saying,
sorry, what was that?
Would you? Yeah, I was saying about giving them a year off. Is that more of a colubrid thing rather than pythons or boas, or do you think the sentiment is similar for them as well?
Sorry, you're cut out again.
Hold on, the audio keeps it. Audience, whoever's watching, whose is it? Is it me? Because I think we're both cutting out on each other.
Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you now. I think we're good.
I got you. I got you now too. Just keeps
Okay.
cutting in and out.
Sorry.
So yeah, you were talking about giving a female a season off. You know, I don't think that there's one right or wrong answer, and I think that different species respond differently to having a season off. There are some species that seem much more likely to just grow for an infill clutch than just not go at all. But in general, if you have a female that is breeding age and healthy and in good body condition, and she's in the same room as all the other snakes, experiencing all the same conditions to breed, I think you have to do a fair amount to convince her not to breed that year. And I don't know that the healthiest thing is to think about it as giving them a year off. Like I said, I just see a lot of problems in that year after the year off.
Gotcha. All right. Very good. Another Patreon question that came in from Mason. When it comes to feeding, he wanted to know if there are any supplements like calcium or anything else that people should use when feeding stuff that's like not whole prey, like chicken hearts, fish chunks, frog legs, etc.
Yeah, definitely. The less whole prey you're feeding, the more important that kind of supplementation becomes. I think that snake keepers in general are fairly spoiled by how nutritionally complete whole prey is, and often we don't maybe think enough about it. Personally, I always wonder about how long rodents have been frozen for, and can nutrients degrade over time in the freezer, and that type of thing. I personally tend to supplement my females just a little bit in the springtime when they're building up those follicles and using all that calcium. Maybe once a month or so, I'll give them just a little bit of a broad spectrum vitamin, calcium, and D3 supplement. There's not a lot of good evidence for or against that. Plenty of people eat snakes without any kind of supplementation and just rely on the whole prey side of things. But yeah, as soon as you start feeding, chicken legs and hearts and different cuts of meat that are not whole prey, then I think it's getting a lot more important to think more about your supplementation.
Okay. Very good. All right. Awesome. And your feeding methods, are you mostly a rodent guy, or are you doing birds at all? What's your kind of mentality on feeding?
I would say my mentality on feeding is similar to my mentality on temperature, give them as much of a range as possible. So
Okay.
I think that there are very few species that would eat only a single prey species in the wild. And that variety is probably good for everything. With that said, on the ball python side of things in particular, you can have animals that are frustrating that to kind of hooked on only one thing and really only want that one thing. So I do feed a lot of rodents. I would say the majority of my collection is on mice and rats. I don't breed any of my own rodents. I do have a couple of big morning gecko colonies, and I use the morning geckos as feeders for some of my lizard-eating species. It's mostly to get my baby ant pythons started. Even my adult anthill pythons are on mice. Pretty much all the colubrids are on almost entirely mice. I do supplement some quail for the ones that are big enough. I do some day-old chicks for the ones that are big enough. And some of the colubrids are kind of garbage disposals for anything any of the other snakes don't eat.
Yeah.
But yeah, I try and mix it up as much as I can. I would say the majority of the adult colubrids are probably 90% rodent and 10% quail or chicks or something along those lines.
Nice. All right. Cool. Let's see. Next topic that we could get into. Yes, we kind of went over the egg binding thing. I guess we're getting through all your Colubrid Fest talks, but I guess the next one will segue into this year's talk. Let's talk about your quarantine protocols and what you've done, um, or what you're currently doing in terms of quarantine. That'll take us into the next thing, but because I found it interesting. Kind of give your rundown of what you're currently doing in terms of quarantine, how you're, yeah, just go ahead.
Yeah. So biosecurity is a huge thing for me. I have a small building separate from my house, but kind of like basically right in front of my house. And in that building, I have a couple of different populations of reptiles that, as far as I'm concerned, should never cross biosecurity between those groups. So on the one hand, I have wild turtles coming in from all over the state. Those guys are bottlenecked all into a room together, and then they're going back out to where they came from. So I don't want to be a disease choke point for those guys. So when I'm in that room and that part of the building, I basically treat every animal as if it's in quarantine the entire time it's here. I go through a specific order, treating the animals that have been there the longest first, all the way through to the newest animals. I wear fresh latex gloves for every single patient. All my volunteers on the turtle side of things are trained in terms of biosecurity so that they're not cross-contaminating when they're doing water changes and stuff like that. Every setup, we're really kind of maniacal about it. And separate room of the building, I have the baby landings turtles. Those guys are coming from one location and going back out to that location. And as far as I'm concerned, nothing else enters that room. No other turtles go in that room. No other exotic species go anywhere near that room. The same people who take care of the wildlife don't even take care of the baby landing turtles. And I don't go into that room if I've been in this room with the snakes. Then I have one room that's sort of like my education animals. It's like turtles that have failed rehab and animals that I bring out in classrooms and stuff. And these animals, like if I go to a show and I want to bring a snake other people can handle, I'll use those guys. So that's a separate room. Those guys, once they're in the education room, I kind of treat them all together. So those guys have all been with me for many years, had many negative fecal tests, depending on what species they are. You know, for the turtles and tortoises, they've been tested for things like mycoplasma. For the snakes, they've been tested for things like crypto. Once they're in that room, the people who are handling the education animals, like obviously they're going to handle one animal and then they're going to take out another animal right in front of the same group of kids. So those animals are not quite isolated to the same degree. And then when it comes to the breeding side of things, when it comes to this room, I really focus really heavily on quarantine, so I don't have to be so crazy when I'm actually in here. You know, I have one whole half of my building that I can't do anything without wearing gloves in, and honestly, that would just take away some of the fun for me being in here with the snakes. I like to just kind of work on things and not worry so much about the biosecurity once I'm in here. So what that means is before any snake comes into this room, it's been quarantined for at a bare minimum 90 days, but I can't even remember the last time I brought a snake in here after 90 days. Realistically, it's 6 months to a year. And I would say most often what I do is I kind of batch snakes and I'll purchase a handful of new snakes in the spring and summer, and I'll keep those guys strictly in quarantine, usually in my house, completely separate building, totally away from all my other animals for the entire year until the next season that I'm ready to kind of add some new things to the collection, and then I move quarantine animals that have been here for a year into the main room. And during that time, biggest things that I do is check a couple fecal samples and I send out a couple PCR swabs for the colubrids. The big things that I'm checking for, obviously there's external parasites, things like it's things that you're going to see really obviously. The biggest thing you need to do is just isolate and monitor for a little while.
Right.
The fecals, you'd be amazed at how many captive bred ball pythons from big game breeders come in with fecals. It's pretty crazy. Or come in with parasites, sorry. You'd also be surprised how many wild caught snakes come in with nothing. You never know what you're gonna find until you look. And it's really easy to do 1 or 2 negative fecals and get something weird show up on the third one. Not every fecal is going to test positive every time. So I always kind of repeat those things a few times. On that side of things, I have a little bit of an advantage with my training and stuff. I can just grab things and throw it on the microscope, and sometimes I'll send things out to the lab to get tested for specific things also. But I can at least do fecal float type of things here in house, so I can kind of do it as much as I want to. I do send out PCRs for any colubrids coming in for crypto. Hopefully, I haven't run into any positives yet, but if I did, I would be sending it out to University of Florida, where they can do a little bit of a more accurate job of speciating things than some of the labs like RAL. So yeah, just keep things really, really separated for a really long time and watch for any evidence of problems before I let things come into the main room. Is my main strategy.
Gotcha. Yeah. And when it comes to diseases, we could get right into it these days. What besides crypto, because I think everyone knows a bit about crypto at this point, what is the number one scary on the disease roster?
Sorry, breaking up again.
Any better now?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I could hear you.
Yeah, can you hear you now?
Yep.
Sorry, you're breaking up. What was the question?
What's like the scariest thing on the list of diseases that, let's say, that isn't crypto? Because I think everyone's semi-familiar with crypto at this point.
Yeah, there's quite a few things, and it really just depends on. There. Hello.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
I got you.
You there?
Yep. Can you hear me?
All right, I got you back. Yeah, I got you back.
Okay.
So scariest thing. Yeah, crypto's a big one, and I would hope most Colubrid people know about crypto a little bit, but easy to sneak in, easy for you to have a carrier that's not clinically obvious, can be a little bit difficult to test for. You can get false negatives. Crypto is definitely a big one. Snake fungal disease is another one that's starting to pop up more and more in captive collections. That one, personally, I've more just kept isolated and observed for symptoms more than just testing every single snake that comes in for it. But it wouldn't be the wrong thing to do to just send swabs out on every single snake, especially if you're bringing in a lot of animals. I'm talking about very small numbers of animals that I can isolate for very long periods of time. And there's a couple of other viruses out there that impact colubrids, and it just depends on how big your collection is, how many animals you're bringing in, and what kind of budget you have to be doing testing versus just doing isolation and monitoring.
Yeah. Can you give a... I was going to say, can you give that rundown on the snake polio again?
Yeah, there's a new virus, and I'm actually really excited. I think that I just saw something pop up about Colubrid and Colubrid Radio having Dr. Rob Ossoboff on. He's one of the pathologists who's doing the work on the new snake polio situation.
Okay.
So I think that we will probably get an update from him on the next episode, I'm hoping. But yeah, there's a new virus that has been identified just in the past couple of years. It seems to cause pretty severe neurologic symptoms in a wide range of colubrids and some other non-colubrid snakes. And I think that we're definitely going to be seeing more of it and hearing more about it in the next couple of years. Definitely something to keep an eye out for.
Yeah. Definitely interesting. Your talk was, scary at Colubrid Fest, but definitely stuff we should all be aware of.
Yeah, there's a lot of unknowns out there in reptile medicine for sure. Veterinary medicine has come a very, very, very long way since I was a kid, but there's still a lot of places where it's just kind of in its infancy, and every time we look for new bugs, we find them.
Right. Yeah, and it's so interesting that it's so, I guess underdeveloped could be a word for it, that new stuff is going to keep getting discovered probably all the time.
Yeah, there's just not a lot of money going into reptile veterinary research at all. That's something that I really wish the hobby was kind of more aware of and support more directly. If you guys want to support a great small organization, the Association of Reptile and Amphibian Veterinarians, ARAP, they're responsible for all of the CD that veterinarians get, the continuing education, the conferences, the Journal of Reptile Medicine. Probably not enough people in the hobby even know that group exists, so I want to give them a shout out.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see. Where do I want to go with this next? Let's see. So you've obviously been through plenty of school as a vet. I'm curious, what do you think are some of like today's best educational sources when it comes to reptiles for like the hobby today? For someone who's learning to like get in and learn a lot and absorb as much as they possibly can.
Sorry, breaking up a little bit again. You're asking about like where the best sources of information are?
Yeah, for new people who are looking to like learn.
Yeah. I think that it's challenging these days to be able to differentiate good information from bad. I think there's a lot of good information out there, but there's a lot of relatively inexperienced and overly opinionated people on the internet who have loud voices who don't always have the full picture. And so I think that there's a lot of great books out there, and there continue to be new great books coming out. I think that if you're, interested in pine snakes, for example, there's a book that just came out that's fantastic that I just ordered literally yesterday. There's a ton of good literature out there that's in actual book form. Some of it is getting a little bit outdated. For a lot of species, there are some forums that are kind of archived and have some good information in them. Some of the big Facebook groups can be really excellent resources. Others are full of just kind of regurgitated nonsense. I think my best advice for anyone who is just getting into the hobby is to kind of seek out mentorship from people who have actual experience, to get to actually know people and not just exist in a silo on the internet and on Facebook. Because you really need that kind of real world insight and real world experience.
Yeah. And I'm curious.
Honestly, podcasts are a huge part of it. I think that in some ways it's an interesting moment. Kingsnake.com is shutting down, I think, the week at the end of the week. And that was kind of my I learn more on kingsnake.com than maybe anywhere else as one single source of information. So it's been a long time since that was an actually useful website for a lot of different reasons. But there's a treasure trove of information buried in those forums. So yeah, I would say podcasts, experts in the field, people who are actually successfully breeding these species year after year after year, who've actually done the work and tried things. Try and seek those people out and listen carefully to what they're saying. And the people who have kept one or two animals for a few years and are telling everyone else they're doing it wrong, I would look a little carefully at those kind of people.
Yeah. The old Facebook comment warriors. I asked Dr. Loafman this a few weeks back when I had him on when it comes to the literature, because that's something you brought up. And I'm curious on your opinion. I don't know if you'd listened to that episode, but as these books get a bit older and potentially a little more outdated, it doesn't seem like there's this new wave or new generation of people to write these books replacements. Do you think that's a problem? Do you think podcasts are kind of filling that gap, or what's your kind of take on that?
Sorry, your sound is still breaking up a little bit. You were talking about whether or not the lack of books is going to turn into a problem.
Yeah, basically.
I mean, I think there's a really big generational gap between where people go for their knowledge, and to get information into a book, it needs to be looked at by a bunch of people and is probably going to have some reasonable evidence behind it. And I think a little bit of that gets lost when you transition everything to online. But I think that people today, where they go when they want to learn something, like they go to YouTube. They don't go to Google Scholar or to the library. So we have to figure out a way to translate information from scientific literature into a digestible format that people can find it and hear it and utilize it. And that's exactly why podcasts like this are important. That's why I love Colubrid and Colubrid Radio. Just kind of trying to find new ways to get information out there to people, and it's, I think, going to be really important to the hobby.
Yeah. The one, I guess I'll call it unfortunate thing about podcasts is that, like, I think there have been some very good episodes on here, and I'm going to be selfish and say that, although it's mostly the guests doing the work. But, like, I think there have been some fantastic episodes on here, but those can go by the wayside extremely quickly if someone's not looking in the right places for that information. So, it gets weird, like in comparison to a book where it's like, if it's a book, it's like there. People don't talk about podcast episodes like the way they would the title of a book. You know what I mean? So that's like the dichotomy I see between those two things. It gets interesting.
Yeah, it's hard to go back to a podcast. It's hard to go back to find that thing that you wanted in a podcast. Like, I listen to a lot of podcasts on my drive to work. I got an hour commute. And so often, a few weeks later, and I'm like, oh, I heard, wait, was it Nick Mullen or was it Justin Schlender, or who said that, and which episode and which series was it on? And you can't. It's not easy to go back, and like the episodes don't have like an outline that you can kind of scroll through efficiently to like kind of find your place. So yeah, it's hard to, you get a ton of good information, and that information is archived and it is out there, but it's not organized in a way that's really very accessible.
Yeah. So that it makes it interesting. But
yeah, Yeah,
nonetheless,
sure. And information disappears on Facebook too. You know, one thing that was nicer about some of the older style forums was, you know, it wasn't so much regurgitation. The questions that got asked a bunch of times, there were stickies that would stay at the top of the forum and stuff like that. And there was a lot more archiving and stuff. There's some Facebook groups that have archives and information on them, but a lot of them are just, you know, you burn people out asking them the same question again and again and again. Even people who want to spend time helping people out and giving free advice on the internet get burnt out to answer the same beginner husbandry questions again and again and again. And Facebook kind of, most social media has that aspect to it. They continue to have the same people coming on asking the same kinds of questions. So you tend to get inexperienced people being the one to answer them instead of the true experts who have been tired of answering those questions a long time ago.
Yeah, I hear ya. Yeah, no, it's all very true stuff. So, yeah. I want to see what else we could cover with you. I'm trying to think back to topics we may have talked about in the car. Any other deeper philosophical reptile topics that
sorry, I still
you
have a hard time hearing you, man. It was brutal.
Let me try backing out. Hold on.
Can I put in the chat comment? Just, is it me that's cutting out, or is it Joe? Hmm.
I'm just not sure if it's you or if it's me or who's lagging because no one's saying anything in the chat, and I don't know.
Yeah, I can hear you like 50% of the time, and sometimes your words start getting a little bit frozen.
Anyone in the chat want to offer some help? Let me know what they're hearing. So I'm making sure my audio is good, and I think it's good, but I don't know. All right. How about now?
Sorry, I can hear you now.
Okay.
Right now, I can hear you.
Okay. I was saying,
now you're frozen again.
Really? It might be you because your picture has been like half blurred the whole time. I'm wondering if it's your connection.
Yeah, that keeps happening to me on your end. I'm not sure who it is. It's showing that I have full internet right now. I'm on good Wi-Fi.
Shit.
I can try logging out and going up to my house and trying to on from that Wi-Fi and see if that's.
Oh. And he fell off. I hate when this happens, guys. I apologize. Now I'm going to have to log on to the show, put myself on mute, and see. All right. Sorry, guys. Sometimes when you go live, there are technical difficulties. I'm just trying to hear on whose end. I think it's on his end, but I'm not sure. I just watched it on YouTube and I don't hear myself lagging. So it's unfortunate when that happens, but shit happens sometimes. Okay, he is back. Okay. How about now?
I tried going up to my house to see if maybe the Wi-Fi down in the reptile building was the problem. So see if that's any better.
Your picture is much clearer here. Do you hear me better?
All right. Yeah, so far better.
Okay. Okay. All right, I think we're good. All right.
Sorry about that.
Let's see. No worries. Shit happens sometimes. It's been worse before, trust me.
Well, I apologize if we hear any background noise of kids or dogs.
That's okay. I was asking, I forget what other philosophical reptile talks we may have had in the car, and I was wondering if you wanted to enlighten anyone else.
In terms of what kind of stuff?
I don't know, just we talked a lot about a lot of different things. Yeah, I'm trying to think. We kind of went over your species a bit. Well, let's talk about porfs. I haven't had someone on about porfs for a while, and you're keeping Coxeye and Volantai. Volantai are probably the rarest of them all. I know you and I probably have siblings or semi-related animals because we both got them from Matt. But I don't know about you. I'm excited to get those up to size and hopefully start breeding them. I think they're cool. I think they're underrated, as they do fade a little bit into adulthood when it comes to color, but that baby color, man, I think they're so cool looking. When I saw them in person for the first time, I was like, I have to have these.
Yeah, they're definitely really cool looking, and I don't know. I mean, they're not as flashy as adults, but they have a really kind of cool iridescence to them, and like this silvery kind of red to them.
Yeah,
I just think I think they're pretty neat. But it's a kind of classic situation that I've seen play out in herpetoculture over the years, where you have one person who's really kind of an icon with a group of species, and then get out of it, all of a sudden that species goes from being available to just not being available anymore. I know that Matt has made some noises over the past couple of years about breeding less and pairing less and backing off and stuff like that. So when I saw him start to kind of back off some of those things, I just wanted to grab a few of the more rare localities of stuff that he has, and make sure that someone's keeping those going.
Yeah, I like at this point now, I kind of regret not picking up more of the Volantai because I only have a 1.1 group, but you can maybe help me fill in those gaps eventually with some of the stuff you make. I'm not sure how much more Matt's going to be working with them. I'm not sure if he moved them completely or not, but at the very least, I have a pair, so hopefully it won't be this year, but the following year in 2027, I guess I'll be able to try my hand with them.
Yeah, I have 1 to 2, and one female might be big enough to go this year, but I have a feeling I'll probably be in the same boat, and it'll be next year.
Yeah. But the Coxeye, you're getting your first licks on those this year, probably.
Yeah, for sure. I'll be pairing those up for the first time this year.
Nice.
Yeah, those guys are so cool looking.
Yeah. I'm excited to try to like really have a good full year of production with them. Because I got a taste this year, but I still don't think, they weren't firing on all cylinders for me. So
So
I know they could go.
you're keeping your cocci at the same ambient that your Texas rats and everything else is at. How do you manage that?
Which is like mid 70s or so, and they stay on the bottom drawers. So I keep them as low to the ground as I possibly can. But yeah, there's a good enough swing in the room. I like temp gun the whole room all the time, and I'm always curious and looking. But yeah.
Yeah, I've had to move those guys around a little bit. I have different parts of the building are different temperatures, and different parts of my house are different temperatures. I had a couple issues over the summertime where we kept having power outages, and I was nervous that there was the possibility that if my generators in the building didn't kick on, if I wasn't home when there was a power outage, that the building could potentially get too hot for them.
Okay.
So I actually moved most of the Asian rat snakes up to my house for the summer. So their ambient has been a little bit cooler than usual. But now I'm kind of in the shoulder season. Not sure if I'm going to move them back down there. I think I'm probably just going to go straight into the basement and brumate them, and then bring them up in the spring and go back down to the building.
Yeah, and I know temperature sensitivity has always been a thing you hear about the porfs, but I've genuinely never had it affect them negatively to what I can observe at the very least. I've had them get warm before, down in Florida. I was keeping them the way I was keeping them, and these animals never miss a meal. Obviously, they were breeding for me, although one of the females was unsuccessful. So there was that. But I also moved this past year. There are a lot of different factors at hand. But this coming year, I get to really, in my opinion, try my true hand with them and see how they do. Full fresh cycle and all that good stuff. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing how they do.
Yeah, and this is one that I don't have quite as much experience really playing with exactly their best temperature gradients and exactly how they respond to different options. I know everyone just always talks about keeping them cold, keeping them at room temperature. I've heard Matt comment on podcasts occasionally that it sounds like he does provide a gradient of some kind. I don't know exactly how hot he gives exactly which species. The times that I've played around with giving them a little bit of a gradient, I have seen them voluntarily use into the low 80s, even when they've had access to much cooler temps.
Yeah.
I haven't experimented above that. In general, I'm not nervous about giving animals a wide range and seeing what they do, but so far I haven't had quite the setup that I've wanted for them to really be able to play with things. But yeah, anytime someone tells me that an animal can't tolerate a basking spot, it makes me question what those animals are doing in the wild and how they're actually utilizing their temperatures. And they might truly be a very fossorial, really looking for those ground temps all the time kind of species.
Yeah. I think I've heard Clint say, and sorry, Clint, if I'm misquoting you, that he'll sometimes give his babies like an 80-degree hotspot to help get them started with food. Now, here, again, I'm talking about the 7 babies I've hatched in this past year. I've gotten them all to take frozen thawed, drop fed pinks in ambient temps without an issue. Staying mostly in this room, I'm going to say it varies 74 to 77 throughout the day. Sometimes a little bit cooler in the mornings, depending how I'm setting the heat lately.
Yeah, and from the small group that I have at the ages that I've had, which is the rapid growth phase, the 1 to 3 year kind of phase, they've done perfectly well in my snake room, where afternoon temps might get up to 80, and then most of the day is down in the 70s. They've done perfectly fine in my house at room temp with no heat whatsoever, just constant, 71 to 75, whatever my house is at. They have eaten and grown and done really well, but I'm not entirely convinced that that's the only way to keep them, or the best way to keep them yet. Still got to do a little bit of playing around with them and see what they do when they start breeding, and what their feeding cycles are, and what their body weights look like, and just kind of give them different options and see what happens.
Yeah. Should be interesting for sure. I'd be curious to hear that.
Definitely seems like the mandarins prefer colder than the coxeye, and the Viantae seem to be sort of in the middle from what I've seen so far. But again, haven't had a ton of time to really play with things.
Gotcha. Cool. Let's see. What else do we have? Let's talk about, caging and what you do in terms of size. I know you keep racks. I believe you keep some enclosures as well. What's your how do you differentiate what goes in what? When do you feel the need to upgrade things? And what's your kind of keeping style in terms of that?
I definitely have some big bioactive, very naturalistic stuff, and I have plenty of tubs and racks as well. I think the way that I primarily think about it is I can't think of too many species, and I would say the Asian rats that we were just talking about are maybe my first example of this, of getting a new species and going straight into a rack as a first option. I usually want to play around with what that animal does and doesn't like, before kind of narrowing things down a little bit into the most functional aspects of what they really need. For me personally, I think racks are fantastic for fossorial snakes, for your king snakes, milk snakes, hognose snakes, ball pythons, those kind of animals. I think that you can, also I want to back up and say the disclaimer that I think should be like at the beginning of all of these conversations. You can do a rack the right way or the wrong way. Not all racks are sensory deprivation chambers, but some of them are. And you can do a big fancy cage the right way or the wrong way. And there's plenty of people that have these big, ridiculous, expensive setups that don't meet their animal's basic needs. So I don't think that there is one right way or wrong way. There's a lot of different ways that we can provide for animals' needs differently. But from my perspective, if an animal is primarily terrestrial, they're a better candidate for a tub. And for example, I don't love keeping rat snakes in tubs. Almost all of my rat snakes and corn snakes have been in cages. If you give them arboreal setups, they will use them every single day. And I know people have kept corn snakes in racks and rat snakes in racks for years and years and years, and they can live perfectly healthy, long lives. On the one hand, if you put any snake in a small box with whatever cage furniture, they're going to use it eventually, right? If you put a branch in your ball python's cage, they're going to crawl over it. They're an animal in a small confined space. But if you give a king snake and a black rat snake the same setup, the king snake's going to spend 97% of its time on the ground and a small percentage of its time just exploring wherever. And the rat snake is going to hang out in the branches for a significant portion of its day or week. So to me, that's kind of how I think about that side of things. When it comes to the UVB lighting, I know that's gotten to be a very controversial issue for a lot of people. And there's a lot of people that believe that all animals benefit from UV light. And I can't say that I disagree with that. certainly the difference that you see keeping some species, aquatic turtles, tortoises, iguanas, monitors, there's nothing like natural sunlight for those animals. And by the same token, I have never seen a snake with vitamin D deficiency or clinical calcium deficiency or any evidence of disease from not having UVB lights. And there's endless examples of the people that started these species out in captivity, keeping them through their entire life cycle and into very geriatric ages without ever giving them UV lights and without showing signs of disease. When I have played around with it myself, I have not seen very big differences. I have spent a lot of time playing around with lighting on my animals, and snakes will absolutely respond differently to different types of heat, and will absolutely respond differently to overhead basking options versus belly heat type of situations. But when I've done things like had multiple lights on top of a cage with plant grow lights and heat lights and things like that, and then kind of sneakily added a UVB source to see if the snakes would pick up on that and choose purposefully to use the UVB, I've never noticed any difference or preference for it. They certainly have a preference for different light bulbs and different color light bulbs. If you could just give them two choices of a mercury vapor bulb and a UVB coil bulb and a heat bulb, they might have preferences there. But I know that there are people who will tell you the exact opposite, that say that they put a UVB light on their snake cage that never had one before, and the snake totally changed their behavior and started basking under the light on a regular basis. So I think the jury is a little bit out on how necessary it is. But you could definitely tell from the wall that was behind me in the first half of the video that not all of my snakes have UVB lighting. But the arboreal snakes have fully arboreal setups, like my little Ungaleophis boas are in bioactive setups with plants and tons of climbing and perching and hiding and stuff like that.
Okay.
Pythons are set up with a ton of like clay pots that give them a lot of cracks and crevices to kind of hide in. I just really try and make sure that the way that I'm keeping them matches what their primary priorities are and how they use their habitat and their microhabitat. I think
Gotcha.
Some species you could do that well in a tub, and some species you can't.
Okay. Very good. Yeah, I think all that makes sense. Definitely all stuff we as keepers should kind of think about. But yeah, it's definitely, it's stuff I've given thought to over time. I know I keep a lot of rat snakes and stuff in tubs. I'm not sure. I have nothing really to offer on the UVB topic. I've never kept any snake that way, so I just don't know. But certainly interesting to hear others speak on it.
Yeah, you'll definitely find some very passionate people in both camps of that, and I tend to find that both of them have pretty healthy looking snakes. So
yeah, that's a good point. Kind of just going to colubrids in general. Obviously, you've been at both iterations of Colubrid Fest now. How did you enjoy Colubrid Fest, the past 2 years, and how you see that it's evolving and the overall colubrid hobby in general, really?
I have been more excited by the things that I see coming from CCR and your podcast and Colubrid Fest than about anything else in herpetoculture for a long time. It's a really, obviously I come from an education background. I go to these like dry conferences where people just read their peer-reviewed published studies and show graphs and, the education side of the conference world. And I've been to endless reptile shows, and I've been to so many great conservation meetings, whether that's park or other conservation groups. And it's so good to kind of combine those things a little bit in the way that Zach and Clint have been able to. Just the idea of bringing really high quality education material to the herpetoculture community and to elevate the standard of care, and to bring together different communities of reptile people, from the research world and the keeping world and the conservation world, I think is really very special the way they've been able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of a kind in the hobby. Honestly, it's a one of a kind event. And for anyone who's watching and hasn't been there the last 2 years, please consider coming next year. Genuinely, we mean that, because it's a lot of fun for starters, and two, I think it's going to keep getting better.
Yeah, there's definitely nothing else like that in the snake community. I think there have been other things that have been sort of similarly minded in other sort of subsets of the herp community. I think that the Turtle and Tortoise Preservation Group has their own conference that I think in some ways probably has a little bit of a similar vibe. I haven't been to that one myself, but I know a lot of people who've gone. There have been in the past some amphibian groups and some chameleon groups that have had sort of similar vibes, but I agree the snake community has kind of been lacking in that kind of way.
Yeah. Yeah, and obviously we had a nice little drive there and back this past year. Looking forward to doing it again next year. Waiting for the official
way better
announcement.
doing it together.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Hopefully next year, I have more snakes to bring that would make it more fun for me. And I'm just looking forward to a good time, more people to see and chat with. And yeah, I just think it's a very good thing for the colubrid hobby, and I'm very happy to have been and continue to be a part of it at the very least.
Yeah, for sure. I'll be there.
Cool. All right, man. Any other topics you want to hit tonight before I get into some of my kind of wrap up questions here? Anything I kind of missed on you? Obviously, we talked a bit about. All right, gotcha. All right, very good. So, yeah, some of my wrap up questions. I feel like I haven't done these in forever. I feel like I keep bringing on. It's been like repeat guests or certain topic episodes, but glad I get to kind of ask these again. But I hope the answer to this first one isn't just your career, but you keep and do a lot when it comes to animals in general. What's a big motivator for what keeps you going with the reptiles and all that you're kind of absorbed in, especially on the conservation side of things, both your personal keeping and breeding, what ties it all together and keeps the passion going for you?
I am just sort of super grateful to get to do what I do every day. When I got sick in my senior year of vet school, and it felt like I had worked for so long towards something and then not actually get to ever treat a single patient or help a single person or pet. And in the little more than a decade since overcoming that, I have to say that the Blandings Head Start is definitely releasing turtles into the wild, whether that's injured turtles, or eggs that are coming from those turtles, or head starting a threatened species like the Blandings turtles. It's every time I get to let an animal go into the wild, it just kind of lights that fire again for me and really reinvigorates me. Working with species that nobody's worked with or nobody's been successful with. So, these little bromeliad boas that I'm working with right now are just, I can't wait to figure them out. And so just doing stuff that nobody's done before. I think those are probably the two biggest things, but there's no aspect of this that I don't like. I mean, I'm a big genetics nerd. I think if I didn't end up getting into vet school, I might have gone into some kind of research field, and genetics were sort of like my backup plan. But I love hatching out the ball pythons and not knowing what's going to come out of the eggs and making new combos that nobody's ever seen before. There's so many different facets to what we do that I take so much joy in, and yeah, it's hard to pick just one thing.
Gotcha. No, that's a good enough answer for sure. Let's say we're looking more on the short term, the next 3 to 5 years. What kind of does the future look like for conservation herp? Yeah, let's start with that base question.
Yeah, definitely some big stuff. I kind of had a little bit of a pause for a little while. For a long time, I was breeding the ball pythons and the anthill pythons pretty heavily, and that was really all I had. And during COVID, I kind of just took a break from everything. I was immune suppressed because I had a bone marrow transplant. And so I quit my job, and I was just kind of hiding out at home for the whole pandemic. And it's just been the past couple of years that I really wanted to start growing conservation herp into a bigger and better vision of what I have for it. And so for the first time in a while, I've been growing the collection. So the next 3 years are going to be huge in terms of everything that I mentioned earlier coming up to size and getting breeding again. So that's all the colubrids we talked about are going to be breeding during that time. Savu pythons right now, 3 years old, they're going to be hitting breeding age. Hog Island boas, same thing, going to be hitting breeding age. So we're going to be producing just a ton of really cool, exciting stuff over the next couple of years that I'm really pumped about.
Awesome. Yeah, it's always real nice when the collection like finally starts coming to fruition. I'm kind of at that point now. Like I've been saying, next year is like my year, so to speak, where a lot of things are coming full circle. And next year is going to be my biggest year. I'm excited, and going forward, even after that, the 2027 is probably going to be even bigger than that. So it's just it's always really fun to see all the stuff you've put hard work and money into, actually getting to see those projects through. So glad you're being able to do that as well. What about potential species of the future? Is there anything you're still, we could keep that could be colubrids, that could be anything, but like, is there anything else you're interested in bringing in the collection that you may not have already?
Oh yeah, man. I always have my eye on something. It's hard to not want more. Gotta try and keep it on lockdown a little bit.
Okay.
In terms of colubrids, stuff that I am interested in, Japanese forest rat snakes, 100-flower rat snakes. I have never kept an arboreal green colubrid, and there's like 4 to 6 species that I've been thinking about, but rhinos and barons are definitely.
Barons.
I've been listening to your episodes on people talking about the different sides of those guys. Yeah. Then other stuff. There's a whole bunch of boids that I like and want to get into. A whole bunch of weird Caribbean species. I really like a lot of Madagascar stuff that I used to keep. I used to have Jumerals boas. I would love more than anything to have Madagascar ground boas, but those are very, very hard to come by in the U.S. the past few years. There are a handful of people out there, and I really hope that they are successful.
Okay. Very cool.
The other big one for me would be indigos. Eastern indigos are probably my favorite snake that I've never kept. At least I've worked with them a little bit, but never kept one personally. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I would continue to look forward to growing into.
Awesome. Yeah, it's always fun when there's more stuff potentially. All right, awesome. And the last one, let's see. Let's say you're talking to someone, right? Maybe that person has never kept a snake before, or maybe it's someone that has only kept pythons, boas, something that's not a colubrid. What's your kind of elevator pitch for why colubrids to that person? Why should that person get into colubrids when they've never experienced them before?
I think that there's just a big difference in the way colubrids act when they're handled and in the enclosure. People often come up to me, and I'm selling both pythons and boids and colubrids all together. And if you're looking for something that's going to be more active in their environment and still handleable, but when they are being handled, they're active in your hands. Those are the people that should steer themselves more towards colubrids. If they're looking for something that's going to chill on their lap while they play video games and live in a rack system, then a boa or a ball python or a blood python or whatever it is. There's pluses and minuses to anything, but the colubrids come in so many beautiful colors, and they stay a manageable size. Most of them can eat mice their whole life. And if you set them up in a cool enclosure, they'll utilize it and hang out in the open and cruise around all day and just be really interesting pets.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, fantastic. Zach, thank you for coming on the show. This was a fantastic episode and info packed. I do apologize for the technical difficulties we were having, both to you and to the audience. Unfortunately, shit happens sometimes.
I think that was me.
It's all good. But yeah, I mean, I heard you most of the time, and you were talking the most. So anyone who's listening probably got the most of what you said at the very least. If you couldn't hear me, that's okay. It was mostly me asking you questions, so that's more than fine. But I have the link to your Instagram down in the YouTube description here. Anywhere else that people can find you, or anywhere else they should look for you?
Yeah, Conservation Herpetoculture on Facebook and Conservation Herp on Instagram is probably the best way.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's awesome. So thank you to everyone who watched tonight's episode. This was episode number 84 of the Colubrid Corruption Podcast with Dr. Zach Whitman. Special thank you, as always, to FulviusApparel.com for sponsoring Colubrid Corruption. Again, use code CC10 at checkout to get 10% off your order. Check out the Patreon link, first link in the description below. But yeah, that's all for tonight, folks. Thank you all. This was episode number 84, again with Dr. Whitman. Hope you all enjoyed, and we'll catch you back next week. I'm not skipping again, I promise. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.